In 1911, a Russian schoolteacher wrote a single sentence that every space billionaire alive is still chasing. This man had never left his village, and as a boy he went deaf, and he taught physics in a town you probably couldn't find on a map. But in his spare hours, he worked out the math for rockets that wouldn't exist for another 50 years. And he wrote, "Earth is the cradle of humanity, but one cannot live in the cradle forever." That is Konstantin Tsiolkovsky in one line. And from that line, we can draw a straight thread through Soviet rockets, Princeton physicists, and everybody sketching cities in the sky, all the way to Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who are now setting fire to billions of dollars to get off this planet. They might think that they are fighting over rockets, but they are actually fighting over an idea. And that idea is older than either of them. So here's the question I want you to hold for the next 15 minutes. Where does this hunger come from? Is the reach for the stars a destiny written into us, or is it just the oldest excuse in the world for wanting to conquer something? Hold that thought, because we are going to come back to it. We are going to take the biggest ideas moving through the world and follow them all the way down to where they come from. Today, we're going to tackle the dream of inheriting the stars. Let's get into it. So we have to start with that man in the cradle line. Tsiolkovsky is a nearly deaf provincial teacher who is dreaming of going past the edge of the sky. And he's not an engineer, and he didn't get the idea from some physics book. He gets it from a mystic. His strange mentor is a librarian named Nikolai Fedorov, the founding voice of a movement called Russian Cosmism. And Fedorov believes something that sounds insane even now. He believes that the true mission of humanity is to defeat death itself. He wants to use science to physically resurrect every human being who has ever lived. But once you have resurrected the dead, you have a problem. Because the dead are not going to fit all on one planet. So you would have to spread them across the cosmos. Now, I'm not telling you that so we can laugh at it. I'm telling you that because this is the soil that the rocket grew out of. Before the space dream became a machine, it was actually a religion. It started as a man who couldn't hear, who looked up at the sky and decided that it wasn't a ceiling, but maybe a door. And underneath it all is a much older instinct, one that every great civilization seems to carry. The frontier, the line on the map where the known world stops and the future begins. For most of human history, it was a coastline or a mountain wall, an ocean that nobody had yet crossed. Tsiolkovsky did something wild with it. He turns that frontier 90 degrees and points it straight up. The blueprint. For 50 years, up stayed a dream, until physicists started giving it a schematic, starting with Gerard O'Neill at Princeton in the early 1970s. And he posed his students a heretical question. Is the surface of a planet actually the right place for a growing civilization? And let's think about how strange that is. We assume the answer is a planet, Earth, Mars, some piece of rock somewhere. But O'Neill looked at it cold and said, no, a planet is a gravity well, a trap that you have to climb out of every single time. Why would we move to the bottom of another well? And his answer to this question became a book in 1976 called The High Frontier, which planted a picture in a generation of heads. His picture was the O'Neill cylinder. Let's imagine a tube miles long, spinning slowly in open space. The spin fakes gravity, which pins people to the inside surface, so we can walk around on the inner wall of a world that curves up and over your head. Sunlight gets piped in through mirrors, and farmland arcs overhead like a ceiling made of countryside. So this isn't a spaceship going somewhere. It's actually a place to live, built out of nothing, floating in the dark between planets. But we run into another problem, and it's become the whole ballgame. Because to build a city in space, you would need millions of tons of material, and hauling all of that up from Earth would cost a fortune, because Earth's gravity acts like a brutal tax on every kilogram. So O'Neill's real masterstroke is not actually the city, but the thing that feeds the city. He designed a mass driver. Again, picture an electromagnetic catapult built on the surface of the moon. It's the same principle as the maglev train, which is a track of magnetic coils, except of a train, it flings buckets of moon rock off the surface at high speed. And here's why it has to be the moon. Its gravity is 1/6 of Earth's, and it has no atmosphere to fight on the way up. So the escape velocity is low, only around 2.5 kilometers per second. So there's no chemical rocket needed, just electricity and magnets and the raw material lying on the ground up there. O'Neill built early prototypes of this catapult with an MIT physicist named Henry Combs in the 70s, which was real hardware. This was a machine that could, in principle, sling pieces of the moon into the sky like stones from a sling. O'Neill had just flipped the frontier again. The destination became not a planet, but now the empty space between the planets. And we would fill it with worlds that we manufacture ourselves. That's the thing about a frontier. Every one we've ever crossed, somebody stood at the edge of it first and imagined what the whole thing would look like before a single wagon or rocket ship rolled. The old American West was a story before it was a place. Manifest destiny. And the sponsor of today's video is, well, myself. We get that better than anyone. This video is brought to you by therightbooks.com, a Western-themed bookstore for people who feel the pull of the last horizon, wherever it happens to be. Space, these guys will tell you, is just the final frontier, and it rhymes just like the old one. This bundle of books we have found could not fit this video better. It is Dune by Frank Herbert, a desert planet at the edge of a crumbling empire, a prophecy, a resource everyone will kill for, and one family's mad ambition to control the spread of humanity across the stars. This book is the exact machine we are pulling apart today. Empire and frontier and destiny. Go to therightbooks.com, grab Dune, and read the dream before we finish taking it apart. therightbooks.com. Now, back to the men trying to make this real. The Billionaires. Because O'Neill's blueprint, although obscure, did not die just yet, it reached a teenager named Jeff Bezos. Jeff is at Princeton while O'Neill was teaching there. He reads The High Frontier, and he can't let go of it. Decades later, when Bezos is one of the richest men alive, his rocket company Blue Origin is not really aiming at a planet. His stated long game is O'Neill's game. He wants giant orbital colonies. He talks about a future with 1 trillion human beings spread across the solar system, and he says a civilization that big would give us, in his words, 1,000 Einsteins and 1,000 Mozarts. That is his framing, and of our two space rivals in this story, Jeff plays the character of the buttoned-up fanboy who got rich enough to fund his own fanfiction. Then, there is the fun rival. Elon Musk points the complete other way. SpaceX and its Starship rocket aim at Mars. He wants a single self-sustaining city on one cold red world, a backup drive for our species in case the Earth ever goes dark. And that's the cleanest way to paint this feud. Bezos wants to build brand new worlds in orbit. Musk wants to move into an old one next door. Though, even Musk keeps bumping into physics and money. For example, as of 2026, he has publicly pushed back the Mars timeline several years to focus on the moon first, which tells you how hard the bottom of this gravity well problem really is. But why now? Why are two men racing to answer this Russian ghost? For that, we meet a historian who has been dead for 90 years. In 1893, Frederick Jackson Turner stands up and argues that the American frontier is what actually forged the American character, and that its closing is a quiet national crisis. His thesis is simple, but also scary. A civilization with an open frontier stays restless, inventive, and alive. But if you close the frontier, something in it starts to rot. And whether they know it or not, Bezos and Musk are both answering to Turner. If a civilization needs a frontier, and Earth's is now fully mapped and fully claimed, then you can either open a new one, or you stagnate. And stagnation is exactly the word one investor built a whole worldview around. Peter Thiel. He said that we wanted flying cars, but instead we got 140 characters. And his argument is quite simple. Real progress in the world of atoms, energy, transport, and getting off the planet quietly stalled decades ago, while we all got, dazzlingly rich in the world of bits. For Thiel, space is proof of life, proof the West can still do big, physical, difficult things. Now, plenty of economists push back hard on this. They point to medicine, to solar power, to the computer in your pocket, and say that the stagnation story is overblown. Now, let's mark that dispute and come back to it. But the feeling behind it, that we were promised a bigger future and we got a smaller one, that is the fuel for everything we're going to talk about. The drive. So, we have the engineering. Now, we need to look underneath it, into a stranger and more contested ground. We are going to leave the science section now, and we're going into the ideology, which might be more important to this question. Might I introduce Nick Land, who says something unsettling. Land argues that technology and capital are not actually tools that we control. They are a runaway process accelerating on their own, pulling the future toward itself faster than we can steer. In his telling, the drive outward is not a human choice at all. It is a machine intensifying itself, and we are just along for the ride. This is a fringe idea, brilliant and cold, but also deeply contested. And so I put it in front of you as a provocation, not as a fact. And more intriguing, and much more radical, is a French thinker named Guillaume Fay, who we have talked about, who coined the term called archaeofuturism in 1998. His vision fuses ancient, archaic values with the most advanced technology imaginable, and dreams of a civilization that conquers space precisely by throwing out these gross modern ideas of equality. The political orientation of many figures in this space is hard to pin down. Many of you guys probably see billionaires and tech figures as inherently left-wing. And up until recently, the majority of them have been, with the exclusion of Thiel, at least. But the evolution of the space frontier we are discussing is an evolution of the ideas we have covered, and markedly right-wing. Fay is a figure of the European far right. Scholars have described his work as a blend of counterculture, futurism, and what is now called racism. But all that is important to know is that archaeofuturism is centered mostly on Europeans and their descendant American cousins, i.e., it is ethno-nationalist. I'm putting Phi here because his worldview forces the fast-emerging version of this video's question into the open. But he is one contested thinker. Putting aside his ethnic nationalism, a wider, genuinely more human question is left standing there. Is this urge to expand a real life force running through our civilization? Or is it a story that these powerful people tell over and over to make the next conquest feel like fate instead of choice? Both of those can look identical from the outside. And that is what makes this question quite hard to answer. The Empire. Which brings us to Star Wars. Picture the Galactic Empire, Star Destroyers blotting out a planet, total, absolute expansion. And here's the honest part. In the films, the Empire is the villain. They are the fascists in space, and the story wants you to hate them. So why does it look so cool? Why does the look of this still pull at people? Why does the aesthetic of a civilization that spans the stars feel to so many like the future instead of a warning? That feeling isn't political. It's the same hunger Tchaikovsky felt when he was looking up from his village, wearing a different costume. And it is worth staring at precisely because this story, Star Wars, tells you that it's wrong. So where does the drive to conquer new frontiers actually come from? Because it's been around for hundreds of years. A deaf schoolteacher in 1911 called it a cradle. The Princeton physicist turned it into a catapult on the moon. And our historian called it the frontier. While our billionaires today call it a trillion people. And Phi calls it destiny for Europeans. They're all kind of making the same reach. And I do not think that the rockets or the technology settle whether that reach is a birthright or an alibi, because both stories can fit every fact. If expansion is a true civilizational life force, this all looks like our destiny waking up. If it is just the oldest excuse for a land grab, then it might be a very expensive rationalization for wanting more. The engineering cannot tell you which. The mass drivers will fling the rocks into space either way. What I will say is this. The frontier never actually closed. Turner might have thought it did back in 1893 when the map of the West was filled in, but what if he was wrong? What if it just turned 90 degrees and pointed up? Exactly the way Tchaikovsky pointed it out. And now it's waiting there over our heads, calling our name. Maybe this old man was right. Maybe we need to leave our cradle. Or maybe destiny is the most dangerous word we own, the one we reach for whenever we want to conquer something and feel noble while doing it. I do not think the rockets answer that. All they do is raise the stakes. So I will leave it here with you. Are we truly born to inherit the stars? Or do we just need to believe we were? Tell me down in the comments which bet you would actually make. Is it going to be Bezos building new worlds in the sky? Or is Musk going to move us to Mars? I'll read all the comments and respond. and subscribe if you want me to keep chasing questions like this one. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.